Alright, I gotta say, this is getting annoying. I've seen too much of this stuff going on. It's like, most of us Bengalis, we was raised with good parenting and stuff like that. So, just because you're in Detroit, don't try to act like the streets raised you. You didn't have no good parenting. You don't know how to act. You got an attitude or whatever. Like, you're some street person. Like, you don't know any better. You know what I'm saying? As if you didn't have good parenting. You're not like people that didn't have good parenting. So you shouldn't act like one of those people that didn't have good parenting. They have an excuse because they didn't have it. But Bengalis, for the most part, we had good parenting. So you're a reflection of your parents. So you shouldn't be trying to act like you're a reflection of your parents. So just think about what I'm saying. When you look at your parents and you see how good they raised you, for the most of the Bengalis I'm talking about, obviously everyone's not didn't have great parenting, but for most people I'm talking about, when you look at your parents and you see how good they are and how good they've raised you and how good they tried to raise you, and when you see them, you see that goodness. And then you on the other end, just on the streets trying to act like you're some badass and that you wasn't even raised right, you don't know how to act. I mean, what does that say? That says like everything your parents taught you and how hard they tried to raise you, you just took it and threw it in the garbage and said, that means nothing to me. I'm just gonna pick up what the streets taught me and try to act like a badass person from the streets. When in reality, you got a real good way that you were raised. So you should take that and deliver that side of yourself, that the way you was raised, to the streets. So maybe somebody that didn't have good parenting, they could learn from you. They could be like, wow, look at this guy's hospitality. Look how generous he is. I really like his attitude, his personality. You can bring something that your parents taught you. People can learn from you. But people out here doing the opposite. They think it's cool to try to act like they're some badass on the streets and disregarding everything, good parenting that their parents taught them, and trying to act like they don't know any better and trying to be like the street person and just forget everything their parents taught them. So that's like spitting in your parents' face, man. You should honor what your parents taught you, how they raised you, and you should bring it and show everyone, the public, the streets, everyone. I want you to really ask yourself sincerely, when your parents was raising you, did you ever see them openly drink alcohol, smoke weed, any of that? No, you didn't. Probably 1% of you have, alright? So then you, on the other hand, picked up drinking, picked up smoking weed, all this shit. Where do you think that came from? That came from the streets, because you let the streets mold you. You just disregarded what your parents, how your parents raised you, for the most part. Now, some of the people on the streets in Detroit or in like some trailer park, maybe some of their parents did drink in front of them, did smoke weed in front of them, and maybe they picked up on that because of their psychology or because that's what their upbringing was. But you, on the other hand, you didn't get raised like that. So why'd you pick it up? Because you're being a follower. You was being a follower. You just wanted to follow that lifestyle. You wanted to follow the streets lifestyle because you thought it was cool or whatever your reason was. So all I'm saying is, if your parents tried that hard to raise you, and if they drank or if they smoked weed, which I'm sure they didn't, but if they did, they hid it from you. Okay? So that should
left onto Healy Avenue.
That should mean something to you. I mean, just think about that. Damn, my parents never drank in front of me. They never even drank. They never even smoked weed. They didn't want to do any of that stuff. And they sure as hell didn't want me to do it. But now here I am, because I'm in Detroit or I'm in the, the hood or wherever, I'm gonna do it. Why? Your parents didn't want you to do that. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I mean, I know times get hard, but man, just think about it. Your parents, it would mean the world to your parents knowing that they did a good job raising you, that you didn't end up drinking, smoking weed, or acting like a dog or something on the streets the way that they didn't raise you. It would mean the world to them knowing that they did their job, they did a good job, knowing when you're out in the streets, wherever you go, that you had this upbringing, this foundation. It would mean the world to them knowing that if you was ever in the harshest conditions of this world, or the best conditions, in the streets or in the burbs, that you would know from right from wrong, that you would know how to carry yourself, that you would know how to behave, that you would know how to show compassion and generosity and be humble with people, instead of letting the streets override everything they taught you, instead of having the streets raise you, instead of having the streets tell you to drink and smoke weed when that's not what they taught you, when they taught you the opposite. They would have tears of joy knowing that they were successful in their parenting, that their children didn't let the world phase them, didn't let wrong decisions influence them on how to behave.
1,000 feet, turn right.
On how to behave, on peer pressuring them to drink or smoke or behave of a certain way, trying to mimic the streets. It would bring them so much joy. It would mean the world to them knowing that they did a good job.
Take the next right, then turn right.
That they did a good job in raising you and you implemented what they taught you. That would mean the world to them. Look, this is all I'm saying. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but if you go home, if you look at your parents' face and stuff, you see how innocent they are. They're doing their namaz, they're trying to raise their children as best as they could. That's what they try to do. And then they didn't do any drugs or alcohol or anything. So where do we learn this stuff from? If any of us do drugs and alcohol, it's not like we learned it from our parents. I mean, some people from that probably had bad parenting, they probably did smoke and drink in front of their children, so that's probably where their children picked it up from. But where do Bengalis pick it up from? It's because they're just following the streets and they're following that lifestyle like sheep, you know. They're just trying to fit in, trying to just follow that lifestyle, but they're disregarding what their parents, how their parents raised them. I mean, we're not all perfect, but some of the stuff our parents was stern about, you know, they were really not trying to, they were trying to teach us like some basic stuff, you know, to not do drugs, alcohol, to behave properly, stuff like that. If you go look at your parents' face, you see that innocent face. And then when you're outside and you're supposed to be a reflection of them and you're doing the complete opposite, you're just behaving a way that your parents wouldn't be happy with. You're showing attitude, arrogance, think you're somebody in the streets, and you, like the streets raised you and they didn't raise you. How would they feel? Can you look at your parents' face and say that's what they raised me to be like? Of course you couldn't. Because you know they'd be disappointed. Because you'd be disappointed at your own children if that's what they did after you tried so hard to raise them. So, you know, you got to think about all that. It's like, the point I'm trying to get across is when you see your parents' face, the innocence of their face, some of that should be in you. Some of that innocence should be in you, because if your parents are so innocent and so good, that reflection, that should have implemented in you too. As much as some of us try to go out in the street, act like we were just raised up here, we had no good parenting, we're like a thug, or we're trying to show like some badass version of us. That's not reality when you got raised by such great parents, you know what I'm saying? So that great parenting, that innocence, those morals, those values that they taught us, for the most of us, that should be a part of your character. Not some fake stuff that you mimicked on TV or you mimicked from what you seen other people do in the streets. That's not how you was raised. Don't fool yourself. Don't trick yourself. Don't try to act and pretend like you've been in Detroit for so long, so this is how you are. Bro, I've been in Detroit longer than most of you. I came here when I was 1 year old. I still don't act like something I'm not. I got some street in me, but I also got the character side, the way my parents raised me. You know what I'm saying? I'm not just gonna abandon that because acting like I'm straight from the streets is trending. That's like me being a sellout, not being true to myself, just trying to fit in. I consider that fake as hell, man. You gotta be true to yourself and where you come from. Bring what's new to the table. Be original. Be original, you know, bring value to the table. The way you were raised, that has value. People would be jealous. People would envy if they knew what we are really about. Bengali people, man, we got love for one another. Our family is like everything to us. So, I mean, if you like hide that side of you and try to pretend and mimic and try to be something you're not just because it's trending, you're not even being real to yourself, man. People will see right through it. You know what I'm saying? So you gotta be real to yourself. So what I'm trying to say is, just think about it. You know how happy your parents would be? It would melt their hearts. They would have tears of joy if they knew that they did a good job raising their children. Their goal in life, one of their main goals was to raise their children properly. So if they found out that when my children came in harsh conditions, whether they were in the suburbs or the hood, whether they had a tough time or a good time, if they had the most toughest time, if they, you know, didn't know how to handle this life, they still had a foundation that their parenting actually helped their children through their life. If somebody gave them, you know, bad advice or peer pressure to drink, to do drugs, they said no because they had a good foundation in parenting. And then they didn't behave like the streets, everything the streets taught them, everything, all the parenting was overridden by the streets. They would be heartbroken if that was the case. But if they knew their children, they raised them well, and the streets didn't override them, the bad decisions didn't override them, all the bad things that the streets offer to somebody, and people try to influence their kids, that stuff didn't faze them because the parenting that these parents spent 20 years, difficult years trying to raise these kids, that actually came through, and that actually helped these children make the right decisions. If that was the case, and these children and all of us, we made the right decisions, most of the times, obviously we're not going to make the right decisions all the time, we're going to make mistakes here and there, but if we made right decisions based on remembering that our parents raised us better, you know how happy that would make our parents? That would just make them so happy. It would make their life feel complete, that they did a good job. They did a great job raising their children. So we got to think about that too, because if we had children, we would want the same from our children, that they made the right decisions when this world was trying to pull them in the opposite direction. It would make us feel complete if we knew that our children benefited from us raising them. But if they just made all the bad decisions and then they let the streets overtake them and override all the parenting that we tried our hardest to provide for them, and we find out that they just let the streets overtake them, that would break our hearts. So we got to think about that too. So I mean, just think about what I'm saying sincerely, with an open mind. And I hope none of y'all got offended, because I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just talking about some stuff, because I know I've seen a lot of people on Facebook, Instagram. Nobody talks about this stuff anymore. So I figured, hey, let me at least say something, because I know nobody else is gonna talk about it. So I hope none of y'all got offended, and if y'all did, my bad. Don't take it personal. It's just my views. It's my thought process. My thought process is a lot different than most people these days. So I hope you can benefit something from it. And I'm sorry if I offended anyone. Just try to take the advice for what it is, and try to listen to what I'm saying sincerely. All right. Look, take this advice from me. You can't just follow people and follow the streets and what's trending. That's why the world is so messed up now. You see so many racist people, bigots, all types of stuff. They think it's a cool trend or whatever. You see people, unfortunately, things that are bad usually seem cool to people, and people try to fit in and they follow those things. Then you see so much bad. You know how there's, for example, you'll find a hate group, but in that little circle, they think it's cool to be hateful and racist. But if you thought on your own and you wasn't into all these trends and following people, then you would just break out of that cycle, and you'd be like, man, I don't care if it's cool. I'm just gonna do my own thing. So people gotta start thinking on their own and be your own person, man. Stop trying to follow trends and what's cool. Oh, it's cool to act like you're from the streets or something like that, and abandon everything your parents raised. I mean, it's cool to pick up the good things from the streets, but you don't gotta pick up the bad things. That's what I'm saying. Be your own person. If everybody was their own person, I guarantee you the world would have been a so much better place. You wouldn't see so much hate and racism and all this stuff. See, one of the things is people are afraid to be themselves. That's why we got all these problems in this world. Everybody wants to fit in a certain group or something like that. People think they gotta be in a circle, fit in, so they'll do things that make them look cool in that group. Even hate groups, they think they're cool within that circle, so they're racist, they hate other people, and the people in that group, they think they're cool. If they hate a certain race, they think it's cool, so they'll compete with one another to show how much they hate a certain race, because they think that's their way of being cool, so they're trying to impress one another. It's similar with other things. When you're hanging out, even with friends, people are afraid sometimes to be themselves, so they try to do things they wouldn't do, but to impress their friends. It's all like peer pressure and all this stuff. That's why if people could just learn to be themselves, then it would be such a better world. You wouldn't see so much hate and racism. That's the problem. People want to follow whatever they learn on the streets. I mean, there's good and bad in the streets. Pick up the good. But why do you got to take the bad? Because you want to fit in. That's why you want to take the bad. But if you didn't take the bad, then you would have been your own person. Take the good. You don't got to take the bad. See, people got to learn to be their own person without having to fit in, without having that, like, that approval. It's like, if you can get out of that phase where you need approval, then you'll be better off. You don't need approval, and it'll be a better world if you can just be your own person. If everybody was their own person and they weren't stuck in this like peer pressure and I want to show off in front of my friends, or I want to look cool, I want to do what's trending, if they wasn't in that phase, then everybody would just be their own person, wouldn't worry about impressing anybody, then would not really try to pick up the bad things, because usually bad things are the things that usually look cool. That's why people do it, and that's why it kind of trends it. But if they weren't into phases and trends and fads, then it would be, everybody would be an individual without worrying about impressing people, and it would be a better world. That's all I'm saying. It would mean the world to your parents if they knew that they did a good job, that the streets didn't get to you, and that you didn't make wrong decisions, and they prepared you for this world, whichever condition that you were thrown at. If you was in a bad position, a good position, in the suburbs, in the hood, you know, whatever living conditions, that they prepared and raised you for that, so you would not make wrong decisions and peer pressure wouldn't get to you. They prepared you for that, and then you made the right decisions. Imagine when times get tough and you made the right decision because of the parenting that you had. That would mean the world to you, your parents. Think about you. If you was a parent and you raised your kids so difficult and so hard for the past 20 years to give them as much good parenting as you could, and you send him off to the streets, and then he actually did what you wanted him to do, the way you raised him, how good would you feel? How happy would you feel? But then if he did the opposite, if he did start drinking, smoking weed, and acting like somebody that you didn't even raise him as, some kind of street, mimicking some street guy or some thug or some like a racist bigot or something, if that's not how they raised you, if you start acting a way that they didn't raise you, how would you feel? Wouldn't you feel heartbroken? Wouldn't you feel like, man, maybe it's my fault because I didn't raise him well, even though you did as much as you could to raise your child? So just like that, your parents did as much as they possibly could. So if you could at least do what they wanted you to do, how they raised you, by not acting a way that they didn't raise you, by not doing drugs and alcohol when they didn't raise you that way, when they didn't want you to do that. If you could at least do that for them, and then carry yourself as a reflection of them, by not showing people attitude and arrogance and acting like you're some kind of thug or mimicking the streets, like the streets raised you and your parents didn't raise you, then if you did that, and if you was a reflection of how your parents raised you, that would mean the world to them. Just think about what I'm saying. Just look past anything I might be saying that seems something that you guys don't like how I said it. I'm not trying to offend you, but just look past it and think about what I'm saying, and think about it sincerely. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I'm just giving some solid advice to myself first and to everybody else. Because look, there's not a lot of people like Bengali parents, I'm not gonna lie. So we need to appreciate that, because man, Italians have nothing on us when it comes to family. For most Bengalis I know, they were raised good, all right? So appreciate that. Don't feel offended for what I said, and think about what I'm saying.